Okay, welcome today to episode 3 of Broken Roads. And again, I have my guest speaker, Dr. Niklas Serning. Thanks again for coming back to see us.
Thank you.
Today we're going to discuss your paper. I think it's called Psychodynamic Nonsense. So tell us generally what inspired the paper.
It's one of those things that's been in the back of my head for a long time, whether to write a book about this, whether to write an article. I didn't feel like psychotherapy was really doing what it was supposed to do, and I got increasingly annoyed by the very clear-faced statements of this is what we know about psychotherapy. This is, this kind of categorical, wildly outrageous statements, kind of the Gabor style. It's all about trauma. I felt I just had to speak up. I was quite scared about it, actually, publishing it, going like, this is the end of my career, career suicide. It turns out it wasn't. So it was irritation, honesty. It was also something about feeling inauthentic as a therapist. You come to me as a client and you've read all the things, right, about what therapy is, where I can make you thin, where I can sort out your childhood trauma, where awareness is curative, and all those things, right? And if I don't believe that, and I don't say that to you, I'm kind of lying by omission, because it's a given that you think that's what you're getting. So I wanted to come out and go, no, you know what? My chats maybe sometimes are quite wise and useful. I'm just a dude who just has some experience from the world, and I'm happy to talk to you. And usually it is useful, but any of those theories that you believe that I'm using, I'm no. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
So you talked about being a bit anxious about putting it out there. How has it been received? So what kind of responses that you're aware of have you had?
Yeah, so I think, I don't know what if it is the most commented on article at Eon, but it might be. It's definitely up there. Very Marmite. So the Lacanians don't like it. So Lacanians are a subspecies of psychoanalysts that are even more convoluted. They even use maths and stuff to kind of weird equations that mathematicians have looked at and laughed at. They don't like it because I'm kind of outing them and I'm not really realizing the depth at which they work. But that could be true, of course, or it is absolute nonsense. It's been remarkably positive, both from clients wanting to have just a solid, intelligent, wise discussion that are tired of the woo-woo, supervisees from all over the world going, yeah, can we please have a chat about doing this in a more straight fashion? The commentary has been, remember we mentioned in the last podcast, the Mott and Bailey, the kind of where you have, we don't have to go through it again, but a lot of people have come back and gone, oh, so you believe everything is just genes then? It's like, no, not all. Oh, you believe therapy is just prostitution? Like, no, I don't. It has aspects that are similar, but no, it's different. Trust me, it is. Yeah.
So just kind of like leading on from there, you raise a really good point. I suppose it's a point that eventually, when I was reading your paper, I kind of got to. I said, well, what are you proposing, and what is your model that you're proposing? Because you are, being a critic of something means that you support something, right? So what is it that you're supporting? Is there a way that we could understand that?
Yeah. So I am this is the most boring article ever from a global perspective. I'm just saying what everyone else is saying. That people.
So you're giving them a voice.
Well,
so you're saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah. I don't know if I've given them a voice. That would be too presumptuous. But I would say that anyone pre-Freud in the West and anyone not in the West would agree that if you're struggling, is usually due to a million different things, partly what you brought into the world, genetically, whatever people call it, and it's partly just through culture and through chance, and that childhood is not that fantastically important unless there's something terrible that happens to you in childhood. Then childhood becomes important. Or I'm 54, and if I go out and something terrible happens to me, then well, I guess 54 is a big year for me, right? Fingers crossed it doesn't. So it's just saying that. It's also saying that if you're struggling in life in Nigeria, Sweden, or Venezuela, you perhaps should have a chat with someone that's thought a lot about life, that has some tricks about how to change your motivations and can kind of understand you. It's sometimes nice to air things, preferably if you can do that with your wife. That would be great.
Or your husband.
Or your husband,
Yeah.
in your case, a wife. And but if that's unavailable, or if the stuff that you're struggling with is not something that really can be shared in culture, okay, fine. As an exception, come to me. But don't make it like, the New York style where you're struggling with something and I go, take it to therapy. That's the same thing as me telling you to don't talk to me about it, take it to therapy. It's like, let's not have that as a default. Let's have the default that if you have a problem, you talk to your wife, you talk to Sylvie, you talk to the world, talk to God. All else fails, yeah, come on then, let's have a chat.
And I wonder, is there something there about the lack of the inability or the absence or the lost skill, I'm assuming it was there in the first place, of just everyday people to have a deeply relational conversation with each other? That there's an intolerance you talked about.
I don't think so. I think that your regular, I'm Swedish by birth, so your regular Swedish farmhand in the 1700s was probably not the most erudite, thoughtful analyst of people's thoughts, but he had a culture that he lived in, a culture where he knew that if he did do his work right and he didn't shag the neighbor's wife, he will go to heaven. He had a story, right? And it worked. So he didn't need to be deep. I think that in the West today, and I do think that there are many other traditional societies today that have that story. But in the West today, there are so many ways to be Colin. You can be a heroin addict. You can be a Catholic. And we managed to take both those boxes, which is pretty impressive. And everything in between, right? And what do you want to be? Do you want to maybe be CEO of the world, or maybe you want to you have many questions about your life, and then you may need to talk to someone, and maybe I am then that someone that you talk to if culture cannot afford you, take you in. So I think it's more of a cultural diversity problem than people can't talk.
So what about then, same question, slightly nuanced, and saying those conversations that go beyond, let's say, surface and just a little bit below. So somebody wants to talk about difficult experiences, shameful experiences, painful experiences, is the same, the go to therapy response, the F off as you put it, go to therapy, symbolic that people don't have the capacity to hear, to be present for people.
We have a culture that cannot encompass the fact that people sometimes color outside the boxes, right? I really don't know. I really don't know. I would like to have a society where we have more clarity about how to live, yet also a broader acceptance of those that don't live like that. So these are generally functional ways to have a good society. This is what every other culture except the West does. Yeah, but what the West is good at, and I think actually against that largely from Christianity, is the openness to difference, the kind of support for the underdog. Yeah, I think sometimes Western culture goes a little bit too far there. But if you're a weirdo, if you're what we call as a weirdo, if you stand outside the bell curve, right, then I think we're really good at going, Okay, but we're still going to try to include you.
Mm-hmm.
The danger with that is that if we do too much, we don't really have a central story that's easy to live and function with. And we create kind of a mismatch where we don't really know who we are. And it's scary to not know who you are. And it's scary for a teenager or even younger to try to define what right and wrong is and how they should live and who they are.
So you kind of, I suppose you present this idea of people, the outliers, the kind of the margins of the bell curve. But do you think that maybe it's more than that doesn't know who they are? Do you think that there's a bigger crisis of kind of identity and kind of purpose and kind of solidity, that there's so much flux, so much change, so many things that we've gone through that cause people to be confused?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. That in order to allow those guys out, to allow them in, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and I think something that the West probably does best, and we must keep. The danger is that we just focus on that.
Sure.
And we forget, now, generally, in order to have a functioning society, this is a useful way forward. Like, let's all drive on this side of the road. Okay, we'll help you if you can't drive on that side of the road. We'll help you, but let's not create a road system that's based on that.
Sure. So how do we find a kind of a way of making kind of other people's experiences that we struggle to assimilate or to bring closer to our own and understand, rather than we all shift over there, we kind of try and find a way to include them with what we know is the kind of, let's say, the kind of the normal standard. We're not on the outliers, we're bringing them in. So rather than create a different world, and I guess maybe that's what happens when we kind of create subclasses, we create different kind of groups of people, and we kind of wrap a kind of a uniform ring around them to kind of say that they're different. And I think also, do you think that says something about the ways in which people stop short of entering into the struggle to do exactly what you're suggesting, because it's easier for them to just kind of treat them as strange, or to push them away, or to reject them, or to just not have time to. Do you think that some of that could be?
That makes. I haven't thought about that, but yes, maybe that makes it easier.
You talked about your decision in the podcast that I watched you in recently. I can't remember the name of the guy, and I will find it.
Psychology is podcast.
Yeah, and I will link that, and I'll put a link into that podcast as well. It was a fascinating podcast, and I think a lot was kind of covered off there. And you talked about, and I know we've discussed this since as well outside of this podcast. You talked about that you stopped working with children. So what inspired you after all this time of working with children, and where are you with that?
Well, I think we see from your book, not that was the sole reason, but we see from your book and many other areas that the problem with children is systemic. Yeah, it's not we can't just take little Colin, give him some CBT, and he'll crack on and be a happy little boy. It's a bigger picture. Kids they don't have that much power, right? So for me to work with the child only, it's a bit like working with only the carburetor on the engine. So I'd rather work with the whole family, and I do still do that. I do still work with the whole family, and maybe mom, dad, and whatever constellation it is, and the child to kind of sort that out. That's one side. Second side is that I sometimes feel it's actively harmful for the kid to sit there and for me to try to get out how they feel about the situation, where actually they should just be told how to crack on. Listen a bit, what's going on. Now, let's give you some clear boundaries, what to do forward. And finally, I'm an existential therapist. I like philosophy, I like meaning, I like religion, like all those things. I don't think, even though I'm also a child psychotherapist, I don't think I'm that good as a child psychotherapist. I think because of that modality, it's like I'd rather have some more solid CBT.
What do the children say about that? Where do you draw that inference? Is it just your own drawn
Just
inference?
from my workings with like early years practitioners, CAMS and stuff like that, and what they do and the results they have. Like, I am really good at philosophically questioning 15-year-olds and 18-year-olds and what's the meaning of life. That love it, bread and butter. I can't go to school because I'm too scared. That's not that. I'm sorry, but that's the asking why is not the way forward. The asking how you feel is not the way forward. The gently going, I get it, you can't go to school. Tomorrow, we're just going to walk around the block. Day after tomorrow, we're going to walk 2 blocks. And by the end of the week, you'll be walking to school. Clarity, loving, gentle clarity. I think those boundaries are needed for kids. They are. This is what we spoke about in the last session, the last podcast. This idea that children, if you want to sell something to a British person, you might have the daughter explaining to the mother in the ad, Mom, have you realized that TikTok is a really cool thing, or iPhones are very good? And the mom goes, oh, thank you, daughter. You would never have that in most vast part of other societies. Other societies, you have mom explaining to daughter what's going on. So we have this kind of switch in hierarchy where we believe that children have their own little inherent wisdom, and they do, and they're lovely, but they're not that wise always. My apologies to my 2 children.
No, I was just kind of thinking, because you spoke about you were measuring yourself about the responses that other therapists might have gotten, and again, is that an assumed response? I mean, because again, we there's a huge debate about how we measure effectiveness, how we measure outcomes. I mean, they're largely arbitrary, right? It's like, I can tell you whether I benefited from my experiences of therapy probably 10 or 15 years after I've had it, right? Not immediately after I've had it. I can kind of then make a resolute kind of assessment and an assimilation of my experiences and go, that was a value. Something might have felt good. I might have gone in there, come out and thought, I feel really good. 10 minutes later, I've gone and used some heroin.
Exactly. So we know exactly. The immediate feeling effect is not, and this is something I think we'll talk more about, that feelings are not necessarily fantastic, high-level approximation of reality. Me feeling that we're having a podcast and you actually hate me might be more my own nervousness or something like that. I don't think you do.
No.
So, feelings are sometimes useful, sometimes a bit dangerous. There was something else I was going to say about therapy. And yes, and all therapies are largely similarly useful and similarly dangerous. About 10% are either through opportunity costs, etc., actually negative. But I guess in terms of what the negative stuff that therapists said was some holy cows that I defiled in the kind of no, it's not all about childhood. I mean, that would make a psychoanalytic therapist go bananas.
Of course.
Or not go bananas, but look at me with pity and be sad that I didn't realize how deeply traumatized I am.
How did you ever get through your studies? You missed that most important aspect of the 101. Yeah.
Yeah. No, because I believed it during my studies. That's how I got through.
No, So look, a lot of people listening won't be psychologists, so they won't even know what psychology is, or psychotherapists, or even counselors for that matter. So can you try as much as possible to just say, what do you think we get wrong in our approaches that we take towards human distress and suffering, or however you would phrase that?
We assume that the root is in childhood.
So the genesis and the anthropology of the pain and the confusion and the distress that is experienced, even if the secondary layers of trauma or distress, was rooted in a historical start point.
That's number one. Number two, we assume, and this one I find the most hilarious one, it's not that much discussed in psychotherapy, is that by you realizing what it was, that would sort it out. World War I was started by some person getting assassinated in Sarajevo. Now we know that. It still happened. Of course. So that kind of awareness is curative is a big problem. Third, we spoke last session, just a very quick recap, or go for have a cup of tea if you've already heard this, is do we see the humans as trees that grow up like this, from this to that, childhood, this is the effect, or do we see them as brambles, which is a totally insane mess? And I think the problem is we see it as trees. We should see it as brambles, which means that, yes, therapy felt good at that time for you, and that felt bad at that time for you, and this is where you are at the moment, but it's an absolute mess, and we don't really know what created what. Everything affects everything, but what we can do is to go, right now, you are the result of all these things. You're sitting opposite me, and you want to have a better relationship with your wife. Let's look at that.
Yeah.
That we can do the here and now.
The big, beautiful bramble.
That's the big, beautiful bramble. I'm sure that your wife will be okay with you calling her that.
Okay. For sure. Now, you kind of discussed the idea of prostitution in your paper.
that got some.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you actually. I think that you were being tongue in cheek. I think you were being deliberately provocative for just a little bit, or at least the transactional nature of this in correlation to like what you observe in therapy culture. At least, the people going and paying for love, they're paying for a service. Even if because you could argue it's not even love that people are receiving as, time. And
yeah, exactly. Well, it is kind of love. Because you come to me and you tell me about your innermost things, and I really hold that. It's pretty damn close to love. And I guess the analogy for me that could be used, first, yes, of course it was cheeky. Of course it was a shot across the bow of many people that do this professionally without much ethics. But my point is that, because, Sylvie, sorry to bring you in again, but we are paying you for sound editing. We're paying you for a service and video editing and general moral support. And so, of course, so we all pay each other we pay you for your time and me for my time and you for your time. So yes, we can say, oh, you're prostituting yourself with Final Cut Pro or whatever. I don't know what sound program you use. So, but there's something different about being a sound engineer and being a prostitute and psychotherapist, because normally it's scratch that, well, you can keep it, but I'll change it, in that in a perfect world, we will still need sound engineers and chefs and ski instructors. In a perfect world, we don't need sex workers. We don't need psychotherapists. You and I can have a chat. I can go home to Nina and have a good sex life with her. Then if it really doesn't work with Nina and we really need some help, and maybe, okay, fine, maybe we need some external assistance. And maybe if you feel like you really can't talk to Nata about your situation, come to me. Fine. But I want to see it as the last resort, not the first resort, the New York take it to therapy thing.
So is the root of most distress or isolation or loneliness or whatever we want to call it, brokenness, trauma, is it the result of not being able to talk about your experience and feeling there's no one that you can tell, that the kind of the bottling up and the holding on to the unspeakable things that people feel, I can't talk to my wife about that. I can't talk to my priest. I can't talk to anyone about that. And I'm drawing on my own experiences, because I believe that really what I need, and it wasn't just a one-time event. There was so much, and I just wanted to keep, it had layers, so the layers had layers, and it kind of, talk about sedimentation, but this was all loose, but it was contained. And I think that the impact of holding that in consistently created a fervent ground for obsessive compulsive behaviors, thoughts, wanting to escape. It was intolerable. So I think that there's something for me. I don't know what other people's lives are like, obviously, but is there something about, have we made too much of what might be an actually much simpler paradigm, as we create these ideas that it's okay to talk about this or it's not okay to talk about that. That there's
I don't know if the root is lack of talking. Maybe it was your root. Maybe that's your personal bramble. I so hope that this will take off, and there's a new bramble analogy that takes over the world. You got 50-50. Sorry, 33, 33, 33.
The bramble logo,
The bramble logo. Yeah, well, that's easy to make, right?
The bramble approach,
so in your own personal bramble, maybe that was it. Although, as cheeky as a psychotherapist, I would say that I think also within that bramble is the sense of being a good person. That kind of sense of, am I okay? And I know people, myself, where everything has to be sorted. It's less relational. There are all kinds of weird brambles that us humans can create. And I do think that closure is important. That sense of understanding, this is where I come from. And yes, psychotherapy can be useful. Also, your friends can be useful there.
Sure.
Work culture can be useful there, right? And sometimes we get into rabbit holes, right? We have a cigarette, and then we have this rabbit hole where we feel we want another cigarette. Otherwise, we feel really nervous and really bad. And that cycle keeps on going, and then we get cancer, right? So sometimes our minds get us into rabbit holes, and then there are actually to give credit where credit is due, there are some useful psychotherapeutic tricks. I mean, you can pay me loads, so you can just go on Google and find them. But there are useful some CBT tricks. I mean, they're not that similar from Stoic.
Well, I think the reference going back to relational approaches, for example, as it comes up again and again and again, that's always, they say the relationship is a therapy, the relationship is a therapy. And I think here there's this kind of crossover where we're kind of, for me, I'm talking about the lack of relationship because I was cut off. There was no one I could talk to. And so when actually somebody paid attention to me and they actually went, you know what, Colin, I notice you, the floor's yours. Tell me. I'm not gonna be embarrassed by what you tell me. I'm not going to be overwhelmed by what you tell me. I'm not going to reject you. I'm not going to tell you to get out, no matter what it is. And, obviously that invitation is terrifying. To me, at first, it's like, this is a trick, right?
That was obviously useful. And I hope, or I know, that when I came to my mom when I was 20 and I talked about something, she gave me that space as well. So I was lucky that I had people I could talk to. I had some friends I could talk to as well, right?
Sure.
So that's back to that. Let's go first to friends and then. But failing that, yes. But why do we need to call it psychotherapy then? Because it was just a space for you to be heard.
Well, I don't know. I'm not fussed whether we call it psychotherapy. Personally, I'm not fussed if we don't give it any label. But we could call it Sophie or anything else. Bramble. We think, at the end of the day, it is an industry as well. We've created it. We've manufactured an industry, much like many other things, and then we've converted. Therapy and a lot of approaches in therapy create the solution before they discuss the problem. They've already got a solution to which they then go out and seek a problem for which to attach it to. So me personally, I do think a lot of the time it was I had nobody I could talk to.
Yeah.
And the effects of that were so isolating. And I don't think that the effects of that for Nicholas would have been different for the effects of Matt or of Sylvie. If you literally have had these distressing and disturbing kind of themes and thoughts and experiences and that sense of alienation, that sense of kind of self-hatred, that sense of kind of you're not lovable, you're not liked, there's no one you can talk to, then naturally I just think that the occurrence of all of the other associated symptoms that they call mental health, whereas I just call it normal reaction to kind of like really, really kind of horrible and painful experiences. But you do get through them. You can, somebody giving you their time. So this idea of prostitution, for me, it would have been some of the best prostitutes I ever went to if it was personally speaking. So, glad to have paid the money and glad for the experience. So,
I guess maybe we could see it. Another thing is that if we don't have to see prostitution as terribly bad, as long as it's acceptable by all parties, and then all of a sudden it is just that you. But that's a huge.
Oh, we
discussion.
found a different word for prostitution, and we don't call it prostitution.
Called brambles.
Yeah, brambles. But you got like, so what when you wrote this, and again was being a little bit insightful. What do you think What do you think somebody listening to as a client who kind of struggled to pay for the therapy might hear in that message?
Well, first, I hope that didn't hurt anyone too much. A little bit of hurt is a learning moment, right? That's back to optimal zone of functioning. So I do hope that perhaps it gave some clients pause and went, can I find this elsewhere? Do I need to see a psychotherapist? Can I? And notice, if I can talk to my mom about this, it's not just that I don't have to go to a therapist. I'm building a relationship with my mom. She knows more about me. I might know more about her. We might create a vibrant family, a vibrant community that is where all of a sudden, instead of Sylvie going to her therapist and me going to my therapist, you going to your therapist, we talk together, we build something, right? So hopefully that could get some of them to end therapy and talk to your mates. For those that really, for them that, like, if that was you hearing that at that difficult time in your life, I hope you take it, that you could see it was a bit cheeky and maybe laugh
I mean, look, I really like the nuanced point. I kind of like to dig into that a little bit more about, so maybe there's a beautiful benefit to this thing we call therapy, whatever it might be. And there's also this severe risk. So it's about the kind of the way, what are we bringing? So as a therapist, what are we bringing? And what is our intention? So if our intentions are to impose, these weird and wacky kind of theories that we that lack credibility, that really don't have viability, that really don't have a scientific basis, and effectively are false, they're just kind of like narratives that sound interesting, then I guess we're causing a lot of harm to people. There's a risk that we're causing a lot of misinformation, a lot of harm, and that because we're in this position of power, this position that's invested with kind of authority and kind of wisdom, that people then go out there and go, hey guys, this is what the emperor told me he was wearing. This is what we should all be wearing. And therefore it's misinformation. Whereas in the other way, so I was thinking about my own my relationships with my children. I talk deeply with my children. I have really strong connections with my children. And I can see the culture. I can see it in their face because they're like, oh, Dad, none of, people don't talk to us about this stuff. They don't really kind of go there. And I'm not doing it to make them uncomfortable. I'm kind of doing it because I love them. I'm doing it because I'm like, look, it's okay. I know the world is different. I know you go out there and you kind of dress up and you put your whatever persona on and out you go into the world. And so you should. I'm just saying to you, I want a genuine relationship with you. We can just talk about this stuff rather than pretend it doesn't happen, rather than pretend we're not really feeling or experiencing these things, that they're okay, that whole range, that whole kind of facade of different experiences. Yeah.
That's how to do it. And it creates strength. If the three of us all go to our therapist, we have three little narcissistic universes where we don't have to make accommodations for each other. I talk to my therapist. He gives me unconditional regard. You talk to yours, you talk to yours. We're all comfortable. But, I mean, that is, oh my God, okay, I'm going to be even ruder and you have to cut it out later. That's a bit masturbatory.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bit like, I'll just have sex with myself over here and you do that
Sure.
over there. Instead of having to deal with the grittiness
But
of the other.
there's the correlation in Christianity, because obviously we call masturbation a sin. We call it sinful, and again, it's because of that. You're turning in on yourself. You're disordering the something that is meant to be poured out for the other.
I'm going to let you write that article.
Yeah.
I've got enough flack.
Yeah. No. I'm just. I can point people to many articles and many people who talk about that stuff far better than me. I mean, it comes from the theology of the body, and there's a lot of people in a lot of places that I will be introducing.
No, I mean the
to.
article saying, but then my next article will go, psychotherapy is not just prostitution; it's also masturbation.
It's also masturbation.
Have a great day.
Yeah. Have a great day, and it's 100 and whatever quid. Thank you. So you discussed the nuance in cultures. Now, given you have a much broader than most, I would say most psychotherapists, and that's not all of them. Many are well-traveled, but not all are. And you're well-traveled, you're well kind of enculturated, and you've always had that, as you discussed in the last podcast, that kind of deep curiosity about other cultures, and you've really kind of drilled into that. So what is the nuance that you're kind of trying to talk about here when you're saying the way in which different cultures understand suffering and trauma and inverted commas trauma, or the persistent and apparent lack thereof of adversity? So kind of their responses in terms of what we might see as adversarial or something that we kind of label as trauma, but they might not see that. They might not see it in that way.
Yeah. So the idea of trauma is the idea of bad stuff exists in other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of there's trauma and then there's bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite unique to us.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a special category that has a special kind of effect on the kind of toxic brains and stuff like that, right? For Western culture up until, say, maybe only 30 years ago, it's just like terrible events, and they're really terrible events, and super terrible events, and a bit terrible events, and it's all a bit terrible. And as long as you don't break, you get stronger. Back to that analogy of lifting with a bicep, trying to lift a glass, trying to lift the table. So that is one difference they have. We already spoken about that. The extreme focus on childhood is a very Western.
It's always childhood.
Yeah,
it's always childhood. The problems always stem from childhood.
They exactly, or at least 90% of them, they stem from childhood. Also, that children should be listened to and they should guide the conversation, which is a very new thing, where we kind of, instead of owning our responsibility as parents. 54 years old, I've been around a little bit. I can probably have a better idea on what to do rather than my 7-year-old, right? So I shouldn't put it on them to own the wisdom of a society. There are many things that can go on.
So you think that the response to the culture in the West that seems to have been immersed in pathological language, it's kind of bathed in it and leaked out of psychiatry, psychology, sociology, and psychotherapy, etc. So tell us a little bit.
So I think it's your religion's fault, actually. I think.
Thank you.
I think that resentment is a result of a bad reading of Christianity. So the way that Nietzsche understood Christianity, which is definitely not the way that you understand Christianity, at least to my understanding, or the way I understand Christianity, but there is an understanding of Christianity where blessed are the meek, where the weak shall come first, and it's harder for a camel to get into whatever rich people, needle's eye and all that stuff, right? And you can go too far in there. You can do only the New Testament, forget about the Old Testament, forget about duty, forget about hardship, and you can go that, you're a victim. And it's good to be a victim. And the one that's the biggest victim is the one that's most likely to get into heaven. And then we get victim Olympics.
Sure.
So I do think that this kind of pathology and taking away a responsibility and agency is a unique Western concept.
And not only a unique Western concept, it's also uniquely bathed in kind of obscurity of how it arose and how it was never really meant to arise in the way that it did, and how it's linked to medical language and linked to a mechanistic way of seeing people, which again goes back to Freud. And there's this kind of, the way a machine should work, and if something there doesn't work, it affects other parts. There's this system analogy. And there's not a lot of evidence base or even science in the DSM or the ICD-10.
I guess that's Enlightenment plus Christianity.
Yeah.
To have that, and if we argue that Marxism stems from kind of the humanism of Christianity, then we got that side as well.
So, do you think that it's also a reaction to those who oversimplify or even manipulate these ideas, the terms, the terminology, the concepts to mean something that they didn't originally mean in the disciplines that they arose from? So you think there's just been a matter of that there was an original good intention that suddenly or somehow become distorted?
So you and I have spoken a little bit about concept creep, and Freud came up with these ideas, right, in Victorian Vienna, where people were, so stuck up. They didn't touch feelings. They didn't, it was a very different world. Totally chauvinistic. No allowance. So, maybe that was a useful corrective to go, maybe there's something going on underneath here. Your immediate thought might not be the true one, and the simple answer might always be the real one. So, and then we go, maybe there's something about really bad events in childhood. Maybe if we go to one of these cultures where childhood is seen as, like in many cultures, children are just seen as defective humans that eventually will grow up and become functional members of society. Until then, we just have to bear them, make sure that they survive. Right? And maybe we should go to those cultures and go, maybe you should listen to your kids a little bit. But let's hope that they don't overcorrect. That we don't have the concept creep of like ACEs, adverse childhood events, where we tell this culture with our nice Western hats on, and we go, if you are the least bit rude, or if you're not totally open to everything that your child brings to you, if you are rude to them, if you are cold to them, you will break them forever, because you'll create a toxic brain syndrome that will then create mental health.
And again, original good concepts could be even things like we observed within the British culture this kind of idea of the stiff upper lip, right? But then we also then correlated sideways. I'm saying correlated, this term correlated, this idea that those with stiff upper lips, right, were more cold to their children, didn't have a very close relationship with their wife, it had all sorts of, let's say, dysfunctional kind of behaviors, and died early of heart disease or stroke.
Really?
Because we don't know. I'm saying this was the picture that was painted. That's the story. And we're saying that those, and we gave them A-type personalities, B-type personalities, and we kind of listed them and categorized them. And so
they did win the war.
They did win the war, and they did a lot of other things like kind of get on with the daily duties that need to be taken care of. Because if we're immersed in this kind of victimhood, this kind of victim and trauma Olympics, so who's going to feed the kids? Who's going to put the lights on? Who's going to build the houses? Who's going to get out and do the work? And they were pragmatics. They were pragmatists. And like you say, maybe a little bit of kind of like loosen up just a tad.
And not only when you're drunk. Yeah.
Not only when you're drunk, or sleeping with your mistress or whatever it might be, whatever else you got up to. And so I think like maybe there was this kind of original good intention, and that concept drift that we're talking about just kind of it gets washed away. And then what happens is the historical kind of assumptions that it's grown out of, the narrative that it's grown out of has been long forgotten. And then we're now talking about what originated, which is a false, started off as a largely false narrative that didn't have any real correlation in reality, no objective truth to it. It's then grown heads, and those heads have grown heads. And then here we are over here, and we're saying, well, if that approach to therapy didn't work, why don't we try this approach to therapy? And why don't we try and match people to therapy? And if we get this personality style to go and see this type of therapist, then we'll have better outcomes. And of course, we had Project Match, we had all of these other things going on. And where did we find that? That it didn't really matter that much about the therapy. Like you say, there were few outliers that were really harmful, really dodgy, or really ineffective, didn't really seem to kind of resonate. But it seemed to be more about the therapist.
And the outliers that were really good.
Yeah.
I think Erickson is an example. And they tried to codify, what did Erickson do? And what they found, that they couldn't codify it because they listened to different excerpts of his therapy, and he changed for every client. Which is how I hope to be with my kids and my friends.
Interpersonal.
Yeah, like when you come to me, I'll try to be useful for you. When my daughter comes to me, I'm different than when my son comes to me.
Yeah. So you discuss that they're generally those who suffer from the effects of trauma, right? Take me, for example. But you propose that the entire trauma literature, especially ACE and traumatology, such as some mainstream proponents, such as Gabor Mate, etc., have overstretched or perhaps overconflated its reach or indeed its significance. And I would go even further to say lied about the proposed correlations in the literature that don't have any kind of objective, scientific, empirical root.
I mean, there's some things that are just like wrong, like polyvagal theory. It's just like, like I talked to a neurologist, they actually went and checked. And they're like, no. Like, no, it doesn't. The nerves don't go like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
You have the Gabor Mate kind of wild theories that it's just shocking, that don't make sense. They just don't hold water. Bessel van der Kolk, similar. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Trauma is painful learning. It is learning. It has an effect. All suffering has an effect. All
so does learning a martial art.
Yeah, it's everything. Or receiving a flower, having a glass of water. It's all learning, right? For me, the key is that if you do grow up in Sparta and you learn how to be a Spartan, or you grow up in an FOB, forward operating base in Helmand, as an infanteer, and you learn how to live in that forward operating base, that's really useful, that you're ready for the enemy. I don't know what the Spartans did like that. But of course, if you bring that back to Civvy Street in Birmingham, we got a problem, right? So we can say, oh, you have PTSD, or we can say that, no, you've learned a way of being that really worked for you, and you were useful. People moved you in helicopters, and you were Ali as F. And now you're trying to choose which cereal box to choose to eat. No one understands you. No one respects you. And your instant responses to someone coming up to you and being a bit rude, which were really useful in Helmand to take them out, is illegal. We can call it PTSD. We can just call it learning that has not gradually shifted into a different learning.
I sent a paper. There's many papers I'm going to link into the podcast for people.
You gave me a lovely evening there with 15 papers.
So, but I thought they were all useful for different reasons. There was one that was very interesting. It's quite a recent paper as well, and it's really digging into something that I had often thought about: combat PTSD. And the thing about combat PTSD that I liken to my own kind of experience, because I do think there's parallels in some of my experience in the camps. Somebody thought that I was kind of stretching it there. You know, of course I wasn't in Auschwitz and I didn't live there, but I lived in a hell. I lived in a prison. I couldn't escape. There was somebody more powerful over me. I was at their beck and call. I had to live with that for many, many years. I couldn't escape from that. I had no power to change that. And I was being completely,
And you weren't trained for it.
And I wasn't trained for
trained
it.
You weren't trained as this real. This is how life's going to be. This is how you get ready for it.
Exactly. And I was thinking that the idea about PTSD being something that is, and again, of course, the research says that the more tours of duty that a soldier will have, the higher the likelihood, which only makes sense, right? The escalation and the sedimentation of those kind of really kind of extreme experiences being kind of placed on top of one on top of the other, being ripped away from family, being ripped away from what's familiar. Yeah, there's a sensitivity towards going over the edge and kind of having an adverse experience to those things. For example, I think the research is saying there's a high incense. What was also really interesting, again, there's something that kind of resonated with me, was that actually a lot of the combat veterans coming back had anxiety disorders, depression, alcoholism, addiction before they went. They were already experiencing a lot of problems, relational problems.
It's a very, very thorny area, this PTSD thing. And of course, I work with soldiers and officers all the time. And I hesitate to talk about PTSD because PTSD is such a weird term. It is dissociation. It is a specific specific signs and symptoms, right? They're radically different from shell shock or Vietnam Wars. Like if you, I think, was it Guatemalan women that escaped civil war? They got calorias, which is like a heat in the body. That was their version of PTSD. So it seems to be very cultural. Like you had joint pains in the olden days, right? So it's a very cultural thing. We tend to feel the way that culture tells us to do. So it's very much like we don't tend to break our bones the way culture tells us to do. We just break our bones, whether in Guatemala or whether here. But with PTSD, we do that. Now, a couple of things. I think PTSD is much more prevalent now because there's a disconnect between society and soldiers. You guys don't know why we go to Afghanistan. You might not even agree, right? So you look at IDF. They have this small little country surrounded by Arab states. I think they have like maybe 1% of the Arab states.
Yeah.
And they know that most of these Arab states want Israel to be from the river to the sea, right? To be pushed from the river to the sea. You got 1% PTSD in IDF. You got about 10 times that in the US. So when you feel that you're doing something, and we can argue about whether IDF or there have been some Glastonbury arguments about what we should do with IDF, but
we'll leave that at Glastonbury.
Yes, yeah. But for soldiers and officers in the Israeli Defense Forces, they feel that they're doing something important. And their society feels that, yes, you're doing something important. They are your service. They are next door neighbors. So you have that connection where what you do is okay. That's number one. Number two, battle is not that bad. Battle is direct. It is exciting. It is honorable. I've been shot at. I've even been shelled. Yeah, you go, fuck. You do, and you run to shelter or you do whatever you have to do. But no, I've never had any kind of terrible, long-lasting negative. There are people who have, and I work with them, and I have colleagues who struggle with it. And then it's terms for numbers. So if we move away from PTSD, because it's hard to know, like, do you have PTSD? How long is a piece of string? Suicide is quite easy to measure. It's quite binary, right? If you control for IQ and kind of childhood, all over childhood, there's no difference between soldiers and civilians. That's a scary stat. And it really, I've Googled that one to death. It is scary. So, because you have to remember that the people we send out are not an average society. These are people that are proud, that are strong, that are going towards the enemy. You probably have a higher incidence of ADHD because, and I see that as an honorable, positive thing that these are the tip of the spear.
Yeah,
and they are also then slightly more likely to be vulnerable to these things. So civilians and soldiers are not that different if you control for characteristics.
And I was thinking about the Israeli Defense Force, which is what IDF is, and when you go to Jerusalem and you go there and you see everybody, you see the young kids at McDonald's and they're kind of eating, they've got their guns, they've got their semi-automatics, they've got their handguns or whatever. It's enculturated, the whole kind of being proud of who you are, fighting for your state, fighting for your liberation. This is what we do. It's kind of ingrained. Whereas I wonder if it's something to do with, we send our veterans out to do the horrible jobs that most people say they don't want to do, and to go to some of the most scary places. And of course, yeah, and I've worked with people as well who have witnessed their friends being blown to pieces, and it's I can imagine, I've seen some terribly violent things myself. I've seen people being murdered, and it's not a nice thing. It's a surreal experience. That's how I would describe it.
It is. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I think that there's maybe it's something that we don't know how to re-enculturate them, because like you say, there's such a distance in the culture that they're almost homeless. They come back to a country and a culture, and they struggle to be back at home because they're there. They've got that camaraderie, they've got that purpose, they've got the spearhead, the kind of art. It's exciting. There's kind of the brotherhood, the sisterhood. There's the unity, which again, I've heard people describe prison like that, long-term prison sentences in the same way. There's that kind of brotherhood. There's, after the scuffle in the beginning of a sentence, there's kind of people building kind of deep and enduring relationships for different reasons of not being let out. They've got nowhere to go. So they have to find a way to create meaning and purpose. But I just wonder if some of it is the way in which we let ourselves off the hook. So we create this thing, PTSD, to kind of say, look, we really don't take account of what we're going to do when our troops come home. We really don't think enough about us sending them there, knowing that they're going to largely be ostracized from the rest of society when they come back, because we don't live in a culture that kind of really says we're super proud of our veterans, we're super proud of the people who go and put their lives on the line so that our countries and our shores can stay safe. We kind of demonize them. We're kind of like, yeah, well, that's something dirty and they're only following the orders of politicians, and we kind of belittle it.
Absolutely, and I do find that criminal as a culture.
Yeah.
That we do that, I think. But then I would say that as an officer.
No,
Yeah.
no, I would say that, and I'm not an officer, and I've never been in the army. So, in that respect, then, should all adversity be seen as something to be afraid of, or even extreme adversity?
I think we should all sit in kitchens with bicycle helmets on, eating organic food.
Fair enough.
Never lift anything.
Yeah.
We could do that, or, and I'm just messing with you, we can be the fire that wants the wind, not the candle that gets blown out by it.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? I think I showed you a slide the other day. I think adversity is crucial. Without adversity, no growth. Without adversity, no. I mean, what is life without it?
So what are the consequences for Western culture of not having adversity? So if we continue, the end, the implosion of Western culture. I agree.
So strong. Sorry, this is very gendered, but strong men create good societies.
Mm-hmm.
Good societies create weak men.
Mm-hmm.
Weak men create bad societies.
Mm-hmm.
Bad societies create strong men.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in that cycle. We have a fantastically good society materially.
Mm-hmm.
Culturally, we don't have no idea where we are, but materially, we have a very good society,
mm-hmm.
and we have become quite weak in terms of our ability to deal with adversity, our ability to say, no, we have to send our troops out there and do the bad thing because that's important, and we have to do our duty to our country in other ways, perhaps. I think yes to adversity, but let's not try.
If we effeminized our men, have we kind of kind of enculturated them into this idea of being that they're toxic, this idea of toxic masculinity? Because I talk about this a lot. I have these conversations quite a lot, and I read a lot about it. About it's terms. I'm not saying it's a respectful term, but it's a description called simps, for kind of
Never heard
basically
it.
men that are walkovers, they're pushovers, they just lie down, they want to be a modern man. And so they kind
I
of,
don't know if we've feminized more. What we've done it, we've taken away the masculinity, right? So, which means that you have nothing left. I mean, if you at least feminize me, at least me and Sylvia, we can just be women, and great, we get something to do. But instead, you just say that I'm bad, and you don't leave me with much alternative. So, the men have high testosterone levels. That means that we are protective and aggressive.
and
And
stronger.
there's some bad sides to that, as you've seen on the streets of Glasgow. And there are also some good sides to that, as I've seen on the streets of Kabul, and the negative sides as well, right? But this is to a large degree who we are. We can hone it, but to call it toxic is to deny reality.
Yeah, I think there's this kind of I do think men have been effeminated. I do think that there's been an attempt by women who have been mind washed into this kind of idea that all men are misogynist. So there's this kind of all men are bad, especially white men. All men are dangerous. And then the hashtag Me Too movement and all of these kind of things. I felt really bad for my own sons because when I grew up, we could talk to women, we could have a laugh with women, we could joke, we could just kind of like mess around. And, there wasn't anybody kind of telling us that there was some kind of deep and kind of disturbing, dysfunctional message in what we were doing. But also, the idea that a man is not allowed to have an opinion, so a man can't set a boundary, a man can't set a rule, a man can't say, I'm going to do this stuff, I would like if you did this stuff to his partner, to his wife. Which is what a strong man would do. In my opinion, I'm a strong man in my own home. I'm a strong man with my children. I'm not a dysfunctional man, and I'm not an abusive man. But I'm a man who's confident and I'm clear, and I know what's good, and I know what's not toxic, and I know what we need to get done. And I know when I talk to my children, I think if my children have fallen below a particular standard that I know that they can measure up to, I pull them on that. That's my job. I kind of have to say, you can do better than that. I know you can do better than that. And and I think that there's this whole idea of women who have taken the domestic abuse language, for example, that's around kind of feminist ideology that any man who wants something, who's confident, who says no to a woman is being abusive, they're being misogynistic.
I think so. You have two bell curves here, right? You have, so let's say, just for simplicity, care and directness. So on a bell curve, yes, women are a little bit more caring than men. And on a bell curve, men are a little bit more violent, direct, whatever, that side of things. And so, there are some women that are much more direct than men, and some men that are much more caring than women. But what I find scary is, yes, it is terrible that an entire sex gets called toxic. That's just, if we start talking about, that's fantastically rude. But what I find almost as bad is that we have a culture that says this entire bell curve of aggression and directness and effectiveness, which is shared by both men and women, that's seen as bad. What kind of culture are we creating then? And how are we going to withstand the onslaught of China and Russia if we have that? Well, we kind of know it.
Well, and some conspiracy theorists that say that it's been long standing ambition, if you like, or indoctrination of the West to kind of slowly kind of creep into our kind of psychology, our family life.
I wrote a book about kind of influence warfare and stuff like that, and I did toy with that idea that maybe Russia has undermined us all along, and I fear that we did it to ourselves. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But again, these things are kind of a wash, and I understand as well that when women have been treated terribly by men, I mean, look, the men we have no regard, no respect for. Well, I speak for me. I can't speak for you, but I assume you wouldn't. who beat their children, who rape their wives, who steal the money from the house, who drink, who act irresponsibly, who cheat, who are just basically kind of fairly vile counterfeits of what they should be, right? And I think because people have had that, because women, our sisters have had that experience, it's made them all like that. And I think if I took the same mindset, from my experience of being abused by a man, and I kind of said all men are the same. Of course, I know that not all men are the same, and I also know the difference between a strong man and their strength and what they bring and their qualities. But I think that women have bought into this idea that men are unsafe, that men can't control themselves, that men have no ability to exert influence over their own biology.
I hear what you're saying. I think you can see that in the media. I don't think that if you drive down to Gloucester or over to Wales or whatever, go into some random village and ask 10 random women about that, I don't think they have that view. I think that I think they know, just like we know, we us men know that not all women are terrible, and I think they know that not all men are terrible. So yes, there's a story, but I find some solace in believing that the vast majority.
So you're saying everyday folk don't buy into that narrative?
Maybe I'm being naive, but I hope they don't. Well, let's stop them.
Well. Here's my take. I think maybe you might be right. I think I'd give you that one largely. I kind of take a little bit of it back by saying the media, the social media, the main narrative is very powerful. The whole domination of the critique around male and female. So we're being pumped by this, and
Which
maybe
takes us back to the victim culture, right? We're going like, who's the dream of this tree model, where it happens over there, and we are just the effect over here, is that it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You're a victim, to paraphrase Prodigy. And if it is toxic masculinity, we could almost say that you're a victim even if you have it, right? So it makes life quite simple if we just put labels on it.
Sure. And I understand the misconceptions, the lies, the deception, the need to sell or get clicks and all the rest of it. But there's very real consequences, a bit like cancel culture. It's both a trope, a narrative, a kind of a movement, if you like, but it's very real. It has very real consequences on a lot of everyday people. Yeah. A lot of everyday people are being damaged, being impacted. Well, I don't know if they're being damaged. It might be too strong a word. But anyway, with that kind of veering too far off the kind of topic, tell us about Robert Plomin's book, Blueprint, How DNA Makes Us Who We Are.
So I think he spent 10 or 15 years writing. So we have had all this indication. So in the 60s, it was all childhood and Marxist structures and society that made us, and then you had this kind of genetic revolution, and massive studies all over the world. Well, Sweden, UK, US mostly, but he waited, and finally, when he felt that the evidence was irrefutable, he wrote it. It's in two sections. One is kind of the take-home message, the bluff or the TLDR, and the second part is the studies, so twin studies, adoption studies, and pedigree studies, which are these three ways of looking at it that he published. So yeah, I haven't even said what it was. So what he said was looking at, if you have identical twins, so they have exactly, I'm going to talk to the camera here. So you have the same identical twins growing up in a family, so they have identical genes, right? Or you have a child that they're still twins, they're still born at the same time, but they are fraternal twins, so share half the genes. And you see the difference between them. And if you can calculate that on tens of thousands, 100,000s of kids, and you also include the people that are adopted out, like identical twins, where one's raised in Sweden, one's raised here, you start to get differences. And these differences are not in terms of like, do they wear blue shirts or not, right? That's back to the bramble idea. But is difference based on what is the bramble made of? Like, how high is the IQ? What are their big five scores? So big five is like your personality, neuroticity, openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, and agreeability. So it highlighted that, and it's been, as far as I know, pretty much standard understanding that 50%, and this is not only personality and IQ, but also like kidney function. About 50% of it's genetic, the variation.
So, understandably, had mixed reviews, and these are broad and reach across the spectrum from groundbreaking to overly deterministic, and criticisms that ignore things like the environmental multiplier. What would you say about that?
Well, I mean, again, that's the problem with social sciences, is that if someone finds it deterministic, or of course it's deterministic, and literally is deterministic. But if someone doesn't like that, they can write an article, and then someone can quote that. So Turkheimer is one, I think, that you mentioned there. So he actually agreed with much of it, but there's some things that he agreed with. And people can go, oh, but in the study he critiques it. And of course, social studies, you can critique anything. But I mean, there's one critique. Should we go into the genetics a little bit? Okay. So we look at these twins, right? And we just know, okay, 50%. We know that. But then we try to go, well, what are the genes that then build up these 50%, right? You and I are twins. You grew up in Glasgow. I grew up in Stockholm. What is the reason for you being a little bit smarter than I am? And then we start looking at genes. And that is hard. I think they sometimes got up to 14% of, so 50% is got up to 14%, and they checked and they got a little bit down and up and down. And so basically, they haven't been able to find the genes that code for this difference, right? But the same thing is true for kidney function. We only know about 15% of why my kidney is better than yours, right? Or why your brain is better than mine. So I would say that those critiques are, I wouldn't agree with them. I would say that, 50%, that's pretty, it depends. So if you do twin studies is one thing. If you do pedigree studies, you take me, my sister, my cousin, my third cousin and stuff. You go, okay, so you can go, okay, so that person is 20% different genetically. That person is 80% different genetically. What are their IQ scores and stuff like that? Then you go up to close to 60% sometimes of like the genes have it. The key, one thing just to go a little bit further, the key that Plomin and then Rich Harris highlight is that the interesting bit, and what I write about in my article, even though many people argued with me about the genetics, is I don't care about the genetics, not that much. What I care about is that listen now, 50% of your IQ, you person sitting there on the other side of a YouTube screen, that's your genetics, right? That means 50% is left. And we would normally think that that's parenting, right? That's the standard story. It's not. Somewhere between 0 and 10%. With some exceptions, like your childhood was highly determining. But, well, we don't know. But I think that it's safe to assume that. But largely, we don't know what the rest is.
Yeah, we don't have a control for me, unfortunately, do we?
No, I mean, luckily, we don't have another you.
Yeah, we don't.
Both because of what you went through.
We don't have a control that was me that went through it. They didn't go through what I went through.
Yeah, exactly. That grew up in Shropshire.
Yeah.
But
So you're saying that the complexity and the semantics and corollaries of the term environment, you'd say, only represent about 10%, and the rest 50% genes, and is that
query is 40%?
Yeah.
So the critiques that they've had, I mean, also some of them are quite valid. You go, well, twins are not treated the same as normal siblings, right? I think you even mentioned that.
Yeah.
But then you have the other fact that sometimes parents have fraternal twins that look like twins, like identical twins, because they're so similar. So they treat them like identical twins, and they only find out much later at the genetic test when they're adults that actually, oh no, we weren't identical twins. But the results for people like that is like fraternal twins. So that kind of highlights that there is no real effect in terms of whether you treat identical twins differently from your fraternal twins.
Yeah. So, getting back to the thrust of the paper,
Yes.
I believe that you were emphasising the overuse and the proposed arrogance we tend to hold, that anything that has been born from a Western origin is dominantly superior and applicable across different cultures. That what we deem to see as good or relevant for us is thus so for all. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
I was a bit cheeky there. So I realized that the people that read this paper are probably quite politically right on and politically correct and eat organic vegan food. And that kind of cluster of people, which actually I'm sometimes one of, we don't like being called racist. We don't like being called Western supremacist. So if I could highlight to the psychotherapeutic community that is all about hearing diverse voices, is that they're being very chauvinist and Western chauvinist about it by insisting their crackpot Gabor-Mate theories that no one else in the cultures that we should respect would ever dream of believing, or maybe they should stop it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it worked.
Now, you cite different critics such as Abigail Shrier, the New York Times best-selling author of Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up, 2024, and Irreversible Damage, Teenage Girls and the Transgender Craze. Now, there have been many books that have been vehemently criticised therapy, as such. What was it about this critique that resonated so deeply with you?
Well, most of the critiques, of course, I haven't read all of them, but they often do two things. Either they throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't think Shrier does that. I mean, she throws a bit of baby out, but it's mostly about bathwater. So either like therapy's all bad and we should just stop it and man up. And I think that's kind of missing the point. Or they replace one bad idea with another bad idea. So you go, psychodynamic is all very bad and stuff. So let's be Marxist instead. That kind of social constructionist Frankfurt School idea. So they're just another bad idea instead, right? So death to psychoanalysis. Long live the king of insert whatever random modality here, transactional analysis. So I think that it's down to earth, it's solid, and it looks at the cultural. And I think that's the key here. If we myopically look at how does psychotherapy work in the West and what is the I'm not going to get into the dodo bird effect, but what is it that is going on with psychotherapy in the West? So like, whoa, open up, look at other cultures, look at the effect of on our culture by the fact that we're so therapeutically focused. I think Abigail Shrier does that. She writes very well. She doesn't do many references. She should do that better. But I mean, she's a popular author. I mean, maybe it's yours and mine.
She thinks the weight of her own opinion carries enough credibility.
Sometimes that could be that. Maybe that is a fair argument. But maybe it's the task of people like you and I that are some kind of experts in the field to then fill in the blanks.
Okay. So if there were 3 or 4 things that you would want the world to know for our professions, in inverted comma, in its allied sense, to take note of, what would they be?
Oh, I like these numbered things. So I've done that. The second podcast, it was when we both came out as loving George Michael, right? So these are not as hilarious, sadly. So create a better culture. Culture. Take responsibility. It starts with you.
So the way in which we create a better shared culture is to take personal responsibility.
It's personal responsibility. It's collective responsibility of making sure that I make sure that you're okay. Political responsibility to make sure that we have a functioning country. National, international, global responsibility. But there's a second one then. Live deliberately. Like really make a choice.
Yeah.
I'm 54 and you I know when you were born, but you're not much younger, and so we're at all.
Yeah.
Do it right here, right now. Like we don't have forever.
We don't have to.
So live deliberately, create a better culture. For psychotherapists, do what's right. Don't do what feels right.
Yeah.
The ontology of affect is a curse. The idea that because you feel it is why you should do it.
Facts don't care about feelings.
They don't.
Yeah.
And a number of times I talk to students. I used to work at UE. I actually left UE in anger because it was so intellectually, ideologically captured. But I'm still with NSBC. I think they still have a good philosophical. Emmy van Dersen is amazing. But the amount of times I've heard therapists and psychologists saying, I chose this modality because it speaks to me. I hope that my knee surgeon has not chosen his modality because it spoke to him. I hope he used nice guidelines.
Yeah.
I hope he did some research.
He went to school and trained properly.
Well, I mean, they are going to school, but they're just learning notes.
Under other good surgeons, yeah.
And I think I have a fourth.
Yeah.
So democracy, relative freedom, and generalized prosperity. That we have democracy. We have freedom. It's not perfect. Generalized prosperity. Yes, you grew up as if it was a third world country. Yeah. But it was as if, and you were, unfortunately, but you were the anomaly, right?
Yeah. So communism isn't the answer.
No, I didn't say that, but no, it isn't. But this, what we have is rare and new and fragile. It's weird.
Yeah.
We think it's because it's always been like this. It's not going to be like this forever. You might not like it, but dictatorship and oppression is normal. So don't throw away this coat because you're not sure about the color. You can get cold.
Okay.
Those are the four.
Perfect. Okay. So what would you change about the way that psychotherapists, counselors, psychologists, doctors, social workers, child protection officers or workers, sexual violence and abuse professionals, even perhaps the criminal justice system and policy shapers are trained and apply the work that they do?
Be evidence-based. Work to change. This is the same as the last one. Work to change the systems and culture.
But you say evidence-based. That's a really overused word. Just because somebody wrote something
that's not
in
evidence.
A journal somewhere, or they wrote something on a site, or they put something in a book. Let's be clear. That's not. That's evidence that it exists somewhere.
Let me add another spin word then.
Yeah.
Be critical thinking.
Be critical.
So both critical thinking and evidence-based have been totally misappropriated. Evidence-based is not a man in a pub or a social scientist writing a paper because he or she believes in it. Evidence-based is randomized controlled trials, science. Critical thinking is the ability to see which of those two piles it is, see the implications, not just go, it has been shown that Glaswegians have better eyesight than Swedes, n equals 2. Sorry, don't count. No SD value too high, right? So proper evidence-based, proper critical thinking, not the Marxist one. Work to change systems and culture. And finally, which I've already said, make DSM-5TR the last DSM.
Should we rip it up?
I mean, you don't have to rip it out. I mean, you just burn it.
Okay. Why? Yeah.
Firewood.
Barbecue. Yeah. So what have I missed, or what have I perhaps categorically misunderstood in my reading or my understanding of what you've written in your paper or what you're trying to say?
Ultimately, what I want to, you haven't missed it, but I want to reiterate it. At the core of it, we want people to not live in a resentment culture. We want people to have together a good society, a good life. Psychotherapeutic culture is often counter to that. Not always. So our main effort should be having a good culture. And for the times that people stumble and that their social environment cannot hold that, then we should have some really kick-ass psychotherapists psychologists or counselors, there's no difference. We just charge differently. And then they should be available there to catch them. Absolutely. But don't make it the norm.
Okay. Looking back at the paper, is there any positions that you take in it that you would reconsider?
I think I was too categorical about the ACE studies, and I think that's what precipitated my bramble analogy. Because just like it's silly for someone to say that 6 aces, 3 is a magic number, but 6 happy aces, bad aces, then you get X amount like that. That's
lose 20 years off your life.
That exactly. That's just silly. But I must admit, maybe it's equally silly. No, you cannot say admit and then go maybe to caveat it. That's cowardly. I must admit that to say that aces don't matter is probably being as much of a fundamentalist as those fundamentalists. So let's just stick with the brambles. And,
So in terms of aces, the way I guess I would look at it, just to throw my 2 pence into it, is it's if they're not engaged with. So it's not that they happen, it's not that they might not be distressing, it's not that they might not cause pain or whatever we might want to call it. It's that if we're leaving people behind, so in my case, and again, I'm talking about extreme here. I believe I'm on the extreme end of the spectrum, right? If a spectrum exists. But it's when we leave all of those things unattended to. All I needed was somewhere safe, someone who could listen to me. And the most effective therapy for me were people weren't trying to feed me clever theories or clever tricks or clever ideas. They were just going, And
there are many ways of attending to it. So when child soldiers in Uganda from the Lord's Resistance Army come back, caveat, I believe it was there. It could be in the Congo, DRC. Anyway, a traditional African, to make it so I don't get in trouble with the references, to reintegrate child soldiers. You have a ceremony. That's 48 hours. They've done some stuff. I know when you go through a checkpoint, you never worry about the adult checkpointers. It's the kids that are the scary ones, right? So, back in my previous life. So, I don't believe that all ACEs need to be dealt with. I don't believe that they need to be dealt with in a specific way. But if you feel that due to a million different things, including your ACEs, including your social class, including the schooling, including the drugs, including being cold in the chapel, all that you feel fundamentally outside of society, let's engage with that. First as a community, first as a culture, and maybe if that doesn't work, as a psychotherapist. But we're addressing the bramble, not the individual moldy brambles of the ACEs. This analogy is going crazy.
So I know we've kind of covered this, but I'm going to ask it again because I think it's just to be clear. Does psychotherapy, counselling work?
If done right, without the nonsense, yes. The reason I'm still in this job, why I still love it, why I'm still enthusiastic about it, why I'm looking forward to seeing my clients, not tomorrow because it's Army Day, but day after tomorrow is private practice day. So I'm really curious, and it does work. But Lord, save me from thy followers.
Yeah. Okay. So how would you recommend anyone looking for a therapist find one? What should they be looking for?
Don't go for the ones that say that they can fix you. Be critical. If it don't feel right, it ain't right. Yeah. So even if they say that, oh no, you need to stay with me and do the proper ending and do all the things, like, if it don't feel right, it ain't right. Go for someone that's lived a little, probably a little bit older, or at least look on their website and see that they've done something else except being a psychotherapist. Yeah.
Registers of membership bodies to avoid or to lean into, or would you not go as far as that?
Nah, I think they're all nonsense. I mean, BACP in particular, I have
Thank
a
you.
special little grudge for them.
Yeah.
But in general, no, they don't make sense at all. These
Sure.
registers. But you know, I wouldn't hold it against someone to be on it, because you have to be on it in order to get insurance and stuff.
Sure.
But no.
So is there anything else that you want to say to anyone watching?
No, I think we've both totally killed our future careers even more.
Yeah, well, didn't have one, but
maybe we can be sound engineers.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we can just have change the name to the Eternal Podcast. How can people contact you? I know we've covered it again, but can we just remind people?
Yeah, just go to bramblessoundengineering.com.
Yeah, okay. If you need a podcast.
If you don't, failing that, if I'm still in the business, I would love to talk to you. And that would be www.serning.com. So just my last name.com.
Serning, SERNING.com. And we're going to put some information, some papers and links to everything that we've talked about today. And again, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Niklas Serning, for being my guest. And also to you, Sylvie. I didn't thank you in the last podcast, so apologies for that. I also called you Sophie in the first one. So again, public apology for that one. You're definitely not Sophie. You are Sylvie. Thank you for being amazing. Thank you for helping to pull all of this together. And I look forward to seeing you all next time.